Hey, so I actually shot an hour and 20-minute video talking about all my favorite things, and then I sat on it for like 2 weeks, and now I've decided that I didn't like it. I'm going to redo it as more than one video. So this is movies, as you saw. How I'm going to do this is I've got two separate top 10 lists, um, and I'm going to what I'm going to do is first I'm going to talk about my 10 favorite movies that I saw for the first time this year. 2 of those 10 movies came out this year. And then afterwards, as a sort of like honorable mention postscript, I'm going to run down more quickly my 10 favorite 2023 releases, including those 2 in the top 2 position. But I didn't want to do that first because it would give away stuff from the list that is more important. Because, like, I liked all of those movies that are on the list of things that came out this year that I liked, but I didn't like most of them nearly as much as many things that I'm even going to be skipping on this list that I liked more. There were 25 movies that I saw for the first time this year that I gave a perfect score to on Letterboxd. If you follow me on Letterboxd, you can find the list there and peruse it yourself. So I'm going to run down this list of the 10 best first watches this year, 10 to 1. And number 10 is Burning, the South Korean film from 2018. Is that right? Yes. Starring probably the most well-known in America Korean actor Steven Yeun, who also was in Beef this year. Beef is one of the best things this year. Movie, TV, anything wise. Beef is one of the best TV shows ever. Maybe I'll talk more about Beef in a different video. We'll see. Burning is a sort of slow burn psychological thriller. It is the ultimate, like, the guy she told you not to worry about meme, the movie. It's about a guy who meets a woman and they date. He has sexual intercourse with her. And then she leaves to go on this vacation to Africa. And when she's in Africa, there's a terrorist attack and she gets stranded in the airport for an extended period of time. And while she's there, she befriends the only other Korean person, who is this guy who's played by Steven Yeun, who, when they come back to the country, the three of them start hanging out together. And Steven Yeun is very charming, extremely rich. He's like everything that the main character is not. And it's this very, very subtle, slow building, just bubbling tension and jealousy as we go throughout the movie from there. Incredible performances all around, especially from Steven Yeun, who is, I think, really showing himself to be like a generational talent, especially this year. He's in Beef too. He's just unspeakably good. Like, truly, like, one of the only, like, millennial actors that I can think of that's, like, I think really going to be held up in that sort of super high regard that we put for people like Philip Seymour Hoffman, you know, from the Gen Xers. Burning was really tense. It was very riveting, even though it was really slowly paced. And it really, like, gets you. It's based on a Murakami. It's based on a Murakami short story, and you know, it's the second time in recent years that there's been this long. It's like 2.5 hours long. This long film based on or inspired, culling from short works of his, and they were both, the other one being Drive My Car. Both fantastic movies. Both absolutely fantastic. Number 9, I have The Banshees of Inisherin, which did come out in 2022. at the very end of the year. It's like basically it came out in 2023. I think it came out like mid-December. But I didn't see it right away. I saw it like a month after it came out when screening season was happening, and I was able to see it. And it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars last year, and people probably know all about it. It's starring Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, and they live on this remote island in Ireland during the Civil War in the early 20th century, and one day Brendan Gleeson says, you know what, I don't want to be your friend anymore. To Colin Farrell, he's like, I think you're dull, and I don't want to waste the rest of my life spending it with you. I want to do things that I think are meaningful, and I don't think that I'm going to find that with you, and so don't talk to me anymore. And then Colin Farrell just can't deal with it. It's a breakup movie, functionally. It is funny. I think overstated, though, how funny it is. Understated, maybe, how absolutely devastating it is. It's very painful to watch a story about two people just, like, destroying themselves to spite each other out of, like, a sort of misplaced love. Because it's a familiar kind of dynamic. Not to things from my past in my life. Martin McDonagh makes good stuff. I didn't see Three Billboards, but you know, I love In Bruges, which also starred the same two leads as this, and is much funnier than this movie. But this is a better movie, I would say. And that furnace, it's winter, you know, it's January in Minnesota. And my office is right next to the furnace, and there's just nothing I can do about it. I'll have to put music or something behind this to kind of take that down. I'm not investing in a lavalier mic. I'm sorry, and so it's just not. It's just the way it is. Number 8. Number 8. Skeleton Man. This. I'll tell first the story of how I found this movie. There's this guy who, if through some strange occurrence he ever saw this, thank you, sir, Darth Slug on Letterboxd, who I don't even remember how I found and started following. I think it might have been looking at, like, obscure movies that I liked and finding other people who liked them and then following them. But he's a person who watches a lot of B movies, you know, low budget movies, psychotronic, weird, oddity things. And so I just started combing through his ratings and reviews and finding stuff that I'd never heard of and things that were lesser known, and kind of adding them to my list and watching a lot of them. And one of the earliest ones that I stumbled upon was this movie Skeleton Man, which was a made-for-TV movie for the Sci-Fi Channel in the 2000s, and stars Michael Rooker and Casper Van Dien. And it is basically Predator. It's about a bunch of commandos who are undercover, so they don't have to be wearing commando gear. And they're in the Forest Preserve, you know, of course, aka the jungle somewhere. But it's obviously like the Forest Preserve in LA. And they're like doing some mission because they're looking for some other team that disappeared because the team got killed by Skeleton Man, who is this ghost of a Native American, you know, pretty, like, offensive, but also almost kind of banal in how generic it is. You know, Native American war guy gets killed and then comes back as a creature for revenge or whatever. But Skeleton Man is the star of the show here, and he is like this. It's a guy in like a full black, like, robe with a hood, and then under the hood is like the shittiest mask of a skull that you've ever seen in your whole fucking life. And it's so funny every time you see it. It never stops being funny how bad the mask is. But then the movie is like, has so many explosions and stuff, and it costs like millions of dollars, but the Skeleton Man costume looks so bad. And every time Skeleton Man appears, it's preceded by the very recognizable and often overused stock sound effect of the eagle screeching. And so that has now turned into a running joke where whenever I hear that in anything else, I'm like, oh, Skeleton Man's coming. Skeleton Man rides a horse. Skeleton Man has a big sword. And so it's like Predator, he hunts people down in the jungle and kills them, but instead of the Predator, it's a skeleton with a sword on a horse. This movie is just like so fun. Like, I watched it with my girlfriend and our roommate and on edibles when I found it, and I had so much fun. But then even more fun, my birthday party, I had a bunch of people over to watch movies. We set up the projector in the backyard and watched Skeleton Man in the backyard with like 12 people, and it was just, oh man, we had so much fun watching that. That was one of the highlights of the year for me on a personal note. Just having had such a blast at that party. The best birthday that I have had maybe in my adult life. Just hanging out with my friends, eating some weed, and watching Skeleton Man in the backyard. Number 7, another really fun one, Smoking Causes Coughing. This one I kind of is like a 2023 release. It came out in 2022 at festivals, and then came out, was released here on Hulu this year. So it's kind of a cheat to say that it's not from this year, but it did come out last in 2022. It's a French movie by Quentin Dupieux, who is best known for the movie Rubber, the movie about the car tire that kills people. This movie is also very irreverent. That movie was always, I felt like, was kind of like just okay. And I saw another one of his movies after I watched this one, because I was like, oh, well, if this was this good, I gotta see more things this guy has done, because I'd only seen Rubber. I saw one that was called Mandibles, which was good, but not as nearly as good as this. So Smoking Causes Coughing is just this absolutely fucking crazy movie about this group of superheroes, very sort of reminiscent of the Power Rangers and other similar things, who fight, rubber suit monsters, but they use the power of cancer. they give monsters cancer to kill them, and the sort of dramatic thrust of the movie is about how they have to go on this like wilderness retreat to like focus on their team building exercises. So saith their boss, who there were a number of things this year that made me laugh harder than I've laughed in many years. This was a year of a lot of laughter. And one of the things that made me laugh the hardest of anything this year, top 5 laughs of the year, was when you meet their boss for the first time in Smoking Causes Coughing. I will never forget how funny that shit was. It made me think about being a teenager and wanting to make a movie, and like all the things that you when you're 13, and you wish, like, I wish I could make a movie with this and this and this and this. It felt like that, like all of the silly, it had all this very sort of childish, a little edgy kind of edge to it, angle to it, and just throwing a bunch of silly random things in, and it just was so funny and so charming and so silly and so dark all at the same time. It really hit the tone like really perfectly, and was one of the most fun things I saw all year for sure. Number 6, and I'm going to tell you up front that I'm not being a bullshit artist when I say this. Number 6 was The Greasy Strangler, a movie that I've been trying and meaning to track down and watch since it came out a number of years ago. It came out back in 2016. The Greasy Strangler is a movie about a father and son, which I think is part of what I loved about it, because I think that if you have a complicated relation, if you're a man and you have a complicated relationship with your dad, there will be a sort of added beneficial element to this movie that you're predisposed to. This is definitely, it's a comedy, it's definitely a movie, if you're a fan of Tim and Eric, like I think that this is definitely going to be up your alley, and if you're not a fan of Tim and Eric, then this is probably not going to be up your alley. It's not exactly like Tim and Eric. I wouldn't say that it's like they're trying to crib anybody's style or anything, but the sort of like mixture of like surrealism, gross out comedy, anti-comedy, and like just, I don't know what else, like sort of absurdism. It's all, it's reminiscent, you know. It did, of all the Tim and Eric things that it reminded me the most of, it would be the film Billion Dollar Movie, which has some really gross stuff in it. And so does The Greasy Strangler. It's about a father and son who it's like they do walking tours of this town, and the son has this girlfriend, and then the dad, you figure out pretty early on, is the Greasy Strangler. He's obsessed with grease. He loves grease, and when he gets greased up, then he becomes this sort of monster who goes around and squeezes people's eyeballs out of their heads. And it is a really weird movie. It is like very, very strange and off-putting. I think that if you don't have a lot of exposure to this sort of style of comedy, it's going to be like really off-putting to you probably. But if you really like Tim and Eric, and like Eric Andre, and like Tom Green, things that sort of do this sort of blend of like surreal and extreme, I think that you'll really enjoy The Greasy Strangler. I really want to watch it again. I only got to watch it the one time, but I just laughed so hard. Just not like, it's like a thing where like I just was laughing like constantly, like nonstop for the whole movie. It was just never stop laughing. Number 5, we've got an honest to God 2023 release. Even though I had a couple of close call technicals. So spoiler for the list to come. But at number 5, we have John Wick 4. This is not, I think, a particularly surprising or interesting pick if you know me at all. John Wick is something that I love. I love the John Wick series, and have for quite a while. And I even, when the third one came out, I skipped school that day. I faked that I had to go to the doctor so that I could go to a John Wick marathon at the Alamo Drafthouse. They were playing the first 2, and then you got to see the third one, and it was like a day or something early. And I went to that. I watched all 3 of them in a row in the theater. And John Wick 4 is the best one. I had previously felt like the second one was my favorite. A lot of people feel really strongly that the first one is or was the best one. Even though the second one has, the third one too, have better action than the first one. And John Wick isn't a movie that like you're really like invested in for the story. I think that the lore and the world building is really great and like a definitely big appeal. But like the plot, the story is de-emphasized in the later movies, but I don't think that it suffers because of it. And here in John Wick 4, it's almost like becoming self-parody, where it's like every time John Wick, comes into a scene, it's like, hey, it's John Wick, blah 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 blah. Yeah, John, what are you gonna do? Yeah, blah 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 blah. Let's do it. Like, he says like probably like 100 words in the whole movie, and it's 3 hours long. And at first I was like, man, that could really go either way. It's like the breeziest 3-hour movie you'll ever watch in your life. Some of the best action set pieces using guns of all time. The only thing I can really even think of that's even like that's better than it is like like 80s John Woo, which is very different though too. Like it's a very different style of gun action. John Wick has its own kind of distinct flavor. This one is really fun too because it's giving homages to a lot of things. The final act of this movie is like functionally the Warriors, and very upfront about it. It's not trying to be anything. It's not being clever. It's just straight up. It's like, we're doing the Warriors, and I love the Warriors. I don't know about you guys. I think the Warriors is fantastic. It was just like, man, it's just so much fun. It's so well done. It's gotta be the best American action movie, at least from the last 20 years, maybe longer, and people are like, oh, Mad Max, it's not an American movie. Not American. It's in English, but it's not an American movie. John Wick 4, I mean, see them all. If you haven't seen John Wick, they just put them all on Netflix if you're in America, so, except for the newest one is not on there, but, go get caught up. See John Wick 4, it was so much fun. Just such a bucket of fun. Number 4 is an interesting one. This year, I think that the biggest takeaway I had across the year was getting into Peter Greenaway. And only 2 of his movies have made this top 10 list, but I also have only watched basically all of them once, except for one that I watched more than once. And I need to watch them again, and I think that if I watch them again, they would maybe one other might crack into this top 10, possibly. But as it stands, we'll go from where they are now, which is fine. It's a little snapshot of how things are, where my brain's at right now. At number 4, we have a Z and 2 knots. Peter Greenaway, 1986. Is that right? 1985. This is a movie that made me angry when I saw it because I was like, oh, this is Dead Ringers by David Cronenberg, but better and earlier, and made me feel a little betrayed by Cronenberg. This is a movie about a pair of twins who are zoologists who become obsessed with death and dissecting dead animals. And they work at a zoo and they dissect all the animals and they get freaky and they fuck on the dead animals. And it's very strange. It's a very strange movie. If you don't like seeing dead animals, not animals being killed, but the corpses of animals, definitely avoid this one because they fuck on like a big pile of dead cows, and they cut them all open and time lapse, decay footage and all of the things you can think of that you're gonna see dissecting all sorts of animals too. It's been a while now since I've seen it, and so it's like kind of far from my mind, but I just remember how like riveted and astonished I was by it. But I'll talk more about Peter Greenaway in a little bit. It's fine. We can save it for a little bit. Number 3, we have the other 2023 release on here is Poor Things. Yorgos Lanthimos' new film that just came out a couple weeks ago, or a week and a half ago. I went and saw it on opening night with my girlfriend and my friend Saul, and we all fucking loved it. Me and Mackenzie were both like just over the moon for it. Saul was like, that's one of my favorite movies I've ever seen in my whole life when we walked out of the movie. Some people I know have felt less strongly about it, but I think that people have generally been really enjoying it quite a bit. And so it's a sort of Frankenstein-ish tale of a woman named Bella Baxter, portrayed by Emma Stone, who is sort of created-ish by a scientist played by Willem Dafoe, who finds the corpse of a pregnant woman who has committed suicide, and he takes the brain of the child and puts it inside of the mother's body. And she begins to develop, her mind is developing at an accelerated rate to kind of catch up with her adult body. And once she reaches a cognizance that, gives her autonomy, she demands to be released from her sort of prison of this castle that she lives in to go out into the world and have her, sort of Bildungsroman sort of adventure. A lot of people have been saying that this is like a feminist parable. A lot of people have been decrying the movie as being this sort of fake feminist parable where they are saying that this really second wave feminism sort of take of like sexual liberation is female liberation. And I think that all of those people are wrong. I think that this is a story about being a woman, sure, but I think that more than anything, it's just a story about coming of age. It's a story about growing up, and it's a story about the world and how crazy and confusing the world is to a child, but then seeing that world with these child, sort of eyes, but you're in an adult body, so you experience the world as an adult, but with the sort of naivety of a child. And how do you navigate that? And, like, what is that world like for someone who has never learned to be ashamed and all of these sorts of things? I don't really think that it's about feminism at all. Certainly you could use feminist lenses to critique it and talk about it in that way, but I don't think that's really the intention of the story, and a lot of people I think are rubbed the wrong way by the idea of this being a sort of movie made by men about a woman's experience, which I get, and I'm not a woman, so I don't feel like I really, I'm not going to argue with them. I will say that, like, my girlfriend, who is a woman, felt really strongly that was not the case, so I think that it's going to be different for everybody. But I think that, it's a very, very, very funny movie. Very funny movie. Incredible performances from everyone across the board, but particularly Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo, who I think, should be winning awards come award season for this movie for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actor. Some of the most interesting cinematography of any, English language movie that I've seen in quite a while. Really, really interesting cinematography that does a lot of really cool things to kind of mirror the progression of the character growing. The performance, Emma Stone is just so wild in it because it's like you watch her grow up and her performance evolve as the character grows. And then the film, it uses the filmic language to mirror that, where at the beginning things are very like tripods with pans, very sort of stilted, and then as the movie goes, it it grows into these like longer, more complicated shots and these tracking, long tracking shots and long like steady cam shots and stuff. It's really interesting how he's using like every technique at his disposal to enhance the filmic language of the movie, which was really, I nerded out about that a lot. The production design and stuff is all really cool. My friend who didn't like this movie was like, I hate steampunk shit, so if you're like a fucking hater like her, then sure, you're gonna think it's stupid, but I really enjoyed it. And more than anything, I was like, this is a movie that's like, it's really funny, it's really entertaining, it's beautiful to look at, it's got a well done, emotional, story that feels significant, and like, you can really take something away from it and everything. It's just it's like it's a big, lush, rich meal of film. It has everything in it. All the flavors are represented. It's like a little tour around the world of everything that cinema can be when it's at its greatest, which is awesome. I think it's great. It's not the kind of thing that's palatable enough to be Barbie or whatever. It's not a crowd pleaser in that way, but like for me and for people like me, I think it is that sort of a thing where it's going to be really universally loved by people who are willing to enjoy things that are strange. Number 2, a movie that I somehow had not ever gotten around to watching for my whole fucking life until this year, Koyaanisqatsi. And man, I mean, like, part of me is like, yeah, it was probably like cool that I waited, like, because now I'm at this age where I really, really can appreciate this for what it is. What a breathtaking movie. A thing that is just truly, like, unrivaled. There's nothing else quite like it. And the things that are kind of like it aren't it. They're just not. I also finally watched, like, Sans Soleil, the Chris Marker movie this year, that's often compared to this. It's great. It's not Koyaanisqatsi. It's just not. And I think part of that is the wordlessness. But it's also just the craft is just out of control. So Koyaanisqatsi, if you don't know, it's I guess you call it a documentary maybe, or a video art soundtracked by Philip Glass, the immaculate, legendary neoclassical composer. Koyaanisqatsi is a word that means life out of balance. And the film is an interrogation of how technology has changed our culture and our society, and the sort of way that our moving away from the natural world has created disharmony, be that through war or industry or whatever. And this is a movie from the 1980s, so it's not even getting into things like the internet. It does deal with mass media, but it's mass media of an era that now is already antique. But the message of it is still universal. If anything, it's worse now than it was when this movie was made 40 years ago. And it's told entirely through eidetic footage, just footage of things, off a lot of time lapses too, just set to music. There's no narration, there's no speaking, there are no characters, but there is a narrative. There is undeniably a narrative, and the narrative is told exclusively through editing, which is very bold. And I mean, very few things like this, I think, had ever existed when this was made, and like I said before, the few things that I feel like were really inspired by it or took the torch up that I've seen have not rivaled it. It is such a deeply powerful, shocking, beautiful, moving, upsetting thing that really zooms you out and makes you have to have this sort of philosophical reckoning with society and our role in it. It was really profound. I found it to just be so deeply profound. Koyaanisqatsi. Go watch it. Number 1. The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. Directed by Peter Greenaway from the year 1989. Starring Michael Gambon and Helen Mirren, amongst others. Those are going to be the 2 names that you know, though. Tim Roth is in this movie, though, too, which is fun. What to say about The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover? It's been a long time since I've seen a movie that made as big of an impression on me as this one did. It was immediate, too, you know. It felt revelatory, and then it stayed with me. It keeps staying with me. I've watched it 3 times this year, and it's like I'm haunted by it. I can't stop thinking about it. It's never far from my mind. It feels like the kind of thing that is everything that I've ever wanted, which I get that experience every once in a while. But like, even when I see things that get me really excited and I love them a lot, and I'm like, oh, this is one of my new favorite things, after a while, after a few months, the love, the excitement, it starts to die down a little bit. You know, I felt that way about a number of these movies. I felt that way about Banshees of Inisherin when I saw it first, and then I watched it again, and then I gave it a lot of time, and now I kind of feel like it has kind of settled back into its natural place. Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover is like this ever-growing snowball running down the hill of my heart, and I can't get rid of it. The music, the Jean-Paul Gaultier costuming, the cinematography that is some of the greatest art and set decoration, cinematography, score, these incredible performances. Everything about it, literally every single thing about it, is firing on every cylinder so perfectly. It is this perfectly machined thing that is tooled with, you know, NASA-like precision to just be perfect. It is just perfect in every conceivable way. And there are a few movies that I feel that way about. Very few. Because even movies that I feel like are among my favorites, a lot of the times I'm like, I can, you know, admit that this movie has shortcomings. This is not a movie that I feel like has any particular shortcomings. So what is it? Now that I've just dribbled off all of that praise. It's a movie that takes place over the course of about a week or so. Almost entirely within the confines of a French restaurant in England, which is run by a French chef who is the cook, but it has recently been purchased by a gangster, the thief, played by Michael Gambon. Every night, him and all of his cronies and his wife, played by Helen Mirren, come to dinner and cause a scene. And then, of course, at the restaurant, she meets a quiet bookseller who she begins a passionate affair with, her lover. And the drama unfolds from there. It's a movie that's very, very obviously upfront about Margaret Thatcher, made during, you know, the Thatcher years in England, by a Welsh filmmaker, Peter Greenaway. And he clearly does not have a very high opinion of her. But it's also just about virtually everything that a piece of art can be about. There's a little bit of it in there. Some of the things that it's about that really resonate with me: food, the relationship between food and sex, big part of it. Class, the experience of various classes, and how culture clashes happen when, you know, the high and low classes collide with one another. It is about also white knighting and like savior complexes, and it's about female empowerment. It's about gross body stuff. It's about liberalism and conservatism in bad ways. It's just, man, it's just everything. And it's beautiful, man. It's just fucking one of the most, maybe the most beautiful thing, most beautiful looking movie I've ever seen. There's a part of me that doesn't really want to talk specifically about anything that happens in the movie, really, because it's just such a goddamn treat to watch. One thing I'll tell you is, no, you know what? I'm not going to tell you that thing, because when I realized it was happening during the movie, it took my breath away. It just it was like a moment. There's this, it's not even it's not a plot point. It's a stylistic choice in the production of the film, in the art direction of the film, that when I noticed it, because it does such a great job of not drawing attention to itself, that when I noticed that it was happening, I literally was struck dumb. I had never seen anyone do it before. I don't know that anyone has. It's which is surprising, but it just took my breath away. You know, what else can I say about this movie? It felt like it went into me, and it's just been rewriting my DNA from the inside all year, ever since I saw it in the spring. I'm haunted by it. I can't get it out of my head. I want to go, it's fucking 4 o'clock in the morning. I want to go watch it right now. Because I just, like, as soon as I start thinking about it, I just want to watch it so badly. It's never far from my mind. There's a song that was originally used in the soundtrack for a different film of his that it was close to being on this list. Drowning by Numbers. It's called Fish Beach. Michael Nyman made the soundtracks for these movies. Goddamn incredible. Just beautiful. If you're a fan of Brian, of Philip Glass, who I mentioned earlier in the Koyaanisqatsi Scotsy section, you know, Michael Nyman, similar sort of neoclassical minimalism. But Fish Beach, they reuse it in this movie as a sort of love theme. And that, it's like a slowed down excerpt from Mozart, Beethoven, one of them. I could just listen to that song on repeat endlessly for hours. It's so achingly beautiful. And that's just one little tiny piece of one aspect of this movie. And it's like every single little piece of every aspect of this movie is just bursting with beauty and life and horror and terror and everything all together. It's all in there. It's the most convicted I've felt in a while, in a long while, to say something like, this is my favorite movie now. You know, the last time, like, I've had movies where I've been like, maybe that's my favorite movie now, and then after a little bit I'm like, no, it's not. But it's been a while. It's been like 8 months. And the last time I had a movie that moved me this much, it was Stalker, which I saw for the first time over a decade ago. And I don't think that this is the first time since then, first time in 10 years that I've seen something that made that deep of an impression on me in a film. And I'm not saying that it's going to do that for you necessarily, but like, this movie just really got me in a really deep, profound way. And I would say that if you saw Poor Things and you liked it, you should really check this movie out, because I felt this movie's fingerprints all over Poor Things. And then I saw a thing with Emma Stone where she said that was not a coincidence. Poor Things is sort of like The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula movie, and like American Pie, all kind of rolled into one thing, which is a crazy thing to say. But like, there's so much of the sort of like visual language of Poor Things, and a lot of the class stuff too feels like there's just a lot. It's got fingerprints all over it. I felt like it did. Anyways, that's my 10. Let me just quickly, I'm not going to talk as much about any of them, but let me quickly run down the 10, my 10 favorite 2023 releases. The top two. But so number 10, Oppenheimer. What's to say about it? The thing I really liked the most about Oppenheimer is more of a conceptual thing than the actual movie itself, which is going back to a time when there were these big budget, ensemble cast, blockbuster movies that were not action movies, that were intellectual, character-driven, narrative-driven, adult films for grown-ups that had big budgets and made a lot of money. I just watched one yesterday, Contact, Robert Zemeckis, the Alien movie with fucking Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey from the 90s. A movie that doesn't have that much necessarily to do with Oppenheimer. It kind of does, though. But that sort of movie is just gone. It just doesn't exist anymore. And Christopher Nolan's one of the only people who's like allowed to make something like that anymore. And it was really exciting to have there be this 3-hour-long, narrative-focused, big-budget, ensemble cast, drama movie for adults, rated R, that was a huge success. Regardless of the politics of the movie, or if you think it's apologia for the bomb, or any of that stuff, I'm just happy that it exists and was successful just for that reason alone. But also, I thought that the movie was really compelling, and I did really enjoy it a lot. And I thought it was a really good movie. It's not a movie that I feel like I would revisit that often. I'd probably watch it again, a couple years from now. But it was good. Number 9, Fast X. Fast 10, the most recent Fast and Furious film. I really like the Fast and Furious movies a lot, especially after the first 4. I think that almost all of them after the first 4 are quite good and fun. They're stupid, obviously, but they have this sort of flavor to them that where they are functionally, in my opinion, they are basically like superhero movies for black and brown people and poor people, in a way where I feel like Marvel movies are very they're very much about, even when the characters aren't white, it's all these sort of white institutions. They're all propaganda for the fucking government and stuff. Whereas Fast and Furious movies are about outlaws. They are about people who come from poverty. They are about people who come from black culture and Latino culture and stuff. Is it the highest quality writing ever? No, but neither are, most blockbusters. It's not about that. But it's about these superhuman people and they've gotten so absolutely goddamn stupid and ridiculous now that they're just so camp and so goofy and fun to watch. The ninth one I felt like was a big misfire, and the first big misfire in quite a while for the series, where like 5, 6, 7, 8, and Hobbs and Shaw all I thought were quite fun and enjoyed all of them a lot. And 9 was the one where it had a lot of stuff that I really liked, but it also had a lot of stuff that I thought was really fucking bad. And then 10, they just totally won me back. It's like probably my second favorite one of the whole series besides 5, which is like generally people agree that 5 is the best one. It's kind of a toss-up to me. I think that 5 is a better made movie, but 10 has Jason Momoa as the villain, and he is just killing it in this movie. He is just such a... The thing that this series needed the most is like great villains. They keep on bringing in people to be villains, and then as villains, they're really boring. But then they also, I have to say this, just let me digress quickly. Fast and Furious is wrestling. It is the storytelling structure of professional wrestling. And so they bring in these characters as heels, as bad guys, that are really boring, but then Dom manages to turn them face, and then they become interesting and fun and lovable and great characters after the fact. You can see that with Deckard Shaw, Jason Statham's character, also with John Cena's character from the 9th movie returning in this 10th movie. He's so much more fun than he was as the bad guy in the 9th movie. 10, they finally are willing to be like, let's get somebody who's going to be a insane, Bond villain, super over the top, super campy, super goofy, super flamboyant villain that's so charming and likable and such a fun villain. That's like the biggest thing that this series has really lacked up to this point, and they just fucking killed it with Jason Momoa in this one. Some really fun action set pieces in it. It's totally, you gotta watch 10 other movies to watch it, but if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. I rewatched the whole series 2 times this year, and I did not regret it. I regret it a little bit. You gotta kind of really slog your way through those first few movies, but you get there. I said I wasn't going to talk that much about these movies, but I'm lying. But I'll try and be more terse. 8 is Barbie. I watched Barbie for the 3rd time on Christmas, even though I wasn't really trying to. I watched it with my girlfriend's family. And I feel like at this point I'm like, I don't need to watch Barbie again for a while. Barbie is the best movie that it could have been, considering that it is a commercial for a toy. And I don't think that it could have ever been a 10 out of 10 great, perfect, classic thing inherently, because I just have too many issues and reservations with fundamentally what Barbie is as a movie. Now, that being said, as far as we've got a big budget studio comedy that did gangbusters, made a bunch of money, beautiful. I'm so sad that there aren't comedies anymore. It just kills my heart, so I was really happy about that. It's also as far as a comedy goes, as far as a big studio movie goes, as far as the movie that made the most money in a year goes, one of the most visually interesting movies. I feel like it's gonna blow out Poor Things in every technical category. Even they're both great and well made. I think Poor Things is better and more interesting, but I feel like Barbie's gonna sweep the floor with it for stuff like art and set decoration and costuming and things like that, and it's great. I'm not gonna say it's not great. This hyper stylized, very interesting and necessary sort of evocation of Barbie and the Barbie world. It's really fun. It's quite funny. I think that the biggest issues with the movie, beyond just the toy commercial stuff, are the plot is. This was something I noticed a lot watching it the 3rd time. The plot is barely there. There's barely a plot, and a lot of the screen time is spent not propelling the plot forward, and instead just sort of doing gags and bits, which is fine, but it kind of what ends up happening is that then you get to the end and you want to have this like sincere emotional moment with the Billie Eilish song in the back, and it just kind of doesn't quite work for me because I'm not invested in that way, because the movie's just not getting me there. But obviously I put it on this list and put it high up on it, so I enjoyed it quite a bit. I put it higher than other comedies that I did watch and enjoy this year, like Bottoms and the Please Don't Destroy movie, Legend of Foggy Mountain. Is that what it's called? It's on Peacock. Both very good. Both worth watching. Number 7, Skinamarink. This is an experimental horror movie. I actually saw it for the first time in 2022, but then it did officially come out in theaters and everything in 2023. A experimental horror movie about two children who are left home alone, and their house gets sort of trapped in this pocket dimension, and then they realize that they are trapped in the house with some sort of menacing presence, a Skinamarink, if you will. And it's an hour and 45 minutes of not a lot happening in terms of like plotting or action. It is just the slowest of slow burns. It is a movie that relies entirely upon atmosphere, and I love that, and I thought it was just so evocative and tense and actually scary. Actually, like, really scary at sometimes. And unnerving, and just, like, felt really innovative and new and doing something really exciting in horror. It's been, like, the last couple years I've really felt the influence of, like, internet horror and creepypastas and things increasingly showing up in, you know, commercially released movies. This movie was made for like $20,000 or some stupid shit. It's like super, super, super low budget. And there are some elements of it, like there's this sort of like fake film grain that's added to it that looks kind of bad and things like that. But like, it was really like, it really felt evocative to me. And also Kyle Edward Ball, who made it, I'm like, well, here's a guy we gotta be throwing money at, paying attention to. Like, he's clearly got just mountains of talent, and if he gets resources, I'm really excited to see what he does. Similarly to how I felt about Jane Schoenbrun's film from 2022, We're All Going to the World's Fair, and now they have their new film coming out at Sundance in just a couple weeks. I saw the TV Glow, and I'm really excited about that. Number 6, the worst experience I had in the theater, but I did love the movie, Cade, The Tortured Crossing, the new film by Neil Breen, a sequel to his previous film, Twisted Pair. This one focuses on Cade, one of the two brothers of Twisted Pair, who now has taken it upon himself to restore this mental asylum and train the patients of it to be holy warriors in his fight against evil. This movie's like entirely shot on green screens. It's like this entire new evolution of Neil Breen's sort of filmic language, because it doesn't really look like, it looks like parts of like Twisted Pair, the green screen sections, but it looks visually very sort of distinct from any of his other movies, but unmistakably is the same authorial voice of all the other Neil Breen movies. I think Neil Breen is one of the most fascinating and interesting and exciting voices in cinema to come from the last 20 years, because he's like Wes Anderson. He has this very distinct, honed filmic voice and authorial voice, and he you know, he has his topics and themes that he harps on and he's really interested in. He has this very distinct style of how he makes movies and how his characters speak to each other and things like that. People get really hung up on the fact that it's bad. I think it's just like really interesting and really entertaining. And like the Neil Breen boxes a CGI tiger in this movie. So like, I don't know, that's probably better than anything that happened in Oppenheimer. Let's be real. The people in the movie theater were absolutely insufferable when I saw this. Everyone was doing Mystery Science Theater bits, talking, trying to make jokes, yelling, screaming over the top of the movie so I couldn't hear it. Everyone was trying to be really cool and funny rather than watching the movie that they paid money to see. So don't do that. Movie theaters are not your living room. Number 5, The Boy and the Heron, the new Hayao Miyazaki film. On one hand, it's like, what is there to say? It's Miyazaki. He can't miss, like, obviously. I feel like this one hit me harder than it did for a lot of other people that I've known. Most of the other people I know were like, it was good. I felt like this was one of my favorites of his. Probably my favorite of his. Maybe my favorite of his since Spirited Away. It's sort of like a culmination of everything that he's ever done up until this point, all kind of blended into one movie. The point of the movie is like, what is the value of my life as an artist? It's heavy shit, and it was beautiful. Of course, it's beautiful, and I felt like it was profound, and I really had a great time watching it. Number 4, a movie that I watched just a couple days ago. Dix the Musical. Never would have imagined that this would be this high on this list. This movie made me laugh so fucking hard. It was just like exactly what I wanted. There's a movie that was right on the cusp of being on the overall top 10 that I like more than this movie. I think that it would be a great double feature, which is called Another Yeti Love Story, Life on the Streets. And they're both like queer, campy comedies, trauma-esque senses of humor. Obviously, Dix the Musical is a musical. It's a musical that feels like it's trying to thumb its nose at musicals, and not in a way that's like Avenue Q, where it's like, hey, it's a musical, but it's edgy. They swear. There's puppets that swear. It's like actually edgy. It's got like Freddy Got Fingered energy, or like really depraved, like trauma sort of sense of humor, which is not what Avenue Q is at all. Avenue Q is like more, I would say, more akin to like a Trey Parker, Book of Mormon type of sense of humor. Dix the Musical is about two guys who are identical twins, even though they are obviously not identical twins. And at the beginning of the movie, God, portrayed by Bao and Yang, tells you to shut the fuck up and not worry about the fact that they are obviously not identical twins, who both work at a company that makes Roombas, but they just sell the parts. They don't sell the actual Roombas. And then they meet each other and they're like, oh my God, we look exactly the fucking same. And then they realize that they were identical twins that were separated at birth. And then they come up with this plan to get their parents, who are played by Megan Mullally and Nathan Lane, that they're going to trick them into falling back in love with each other so that they can all be a family together again. And along the way, we meet the Sewer Boys, and we meet a vagina that fell off and can fly through the air, and we meet just so many things. And it is just depraved and deranged and so funny and so weird and just so chaotic. It's the thing where it's like, I'm happy that there are like normalized queer stories that are like nice and, rom-coms and stuff like Fire Island, which had Bao and Yang in it. And I'm like, I'm willing to forgive how boring Fire Island was because Bao and Yang is in this movie, which is like the sort of like anarcho spirit, rebellious, like getting back to its roots. Let's remember that like being gay, that was like a counterculture, right? It wasn't meant to be in the mainstream. It was the whole like part of it. It was like the whole purpose of it, right? But so that sort of tone is always going to draw me more. The John Waters tone, the Gregor Rocky tone is just so much more appealing to me. And this is like that plus, a sort of Greasy Strangler, Tim and Eric, Tom Green, plus musical, just insanity. Sewer Boys, just the Sewer Boys. I just love the Sewer Boys. Number 2 and number 1 I already went over are John Wick and Poor Things. And so the last song I'll talk about, number 3, Beau is Afraid, the new Ari Aster movie. A movie that I need to see again because I felt kind of conflicted about it in a lot of ways, but I felt that way when I saw Midsommar the first time, and then when I watched it again, it all kind of fell into place for me. In some ways, the funniest movie that I've seen ever. Elements of it are so shockingly beautiful and creative. Also Nathan Lane. But also sometimes it felt like it wasn't quite adding up all the way. And I felt a little reserved about aspects of it. But now that I know the whole thing, I feel like going back, I'm going to have a very different experience on a second viewing. It's a sort of dark comedy, fever dream, anxiety nightmare about Joaquin Phoenix trying to go home to see his mom. He lives in the city. It's like a 4-act structure. The beginning is him in the city at his apartment, which is just one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Then he ends up waylaid and being cared for by this sort of suburban, idyllic but insane family that Nathan Lane is the father of. Then he winds up in the woods with this sort of group of people who make plays in the forest, and then in the final act he gets home. He goes to see his mom. And it's so funny. It's so weird. It's like Charlie Kaufman, a lot of it reminded me of Charlie Kaufman a lot. But it's also definitely like its own thing. Ari Aster is one of the most exciting, he's really like, I'm such a huge fan of when people take all of the sort of goodwill that they've accrued and then they cash it all in on this big swinging for the fences, insane, epic, overlong, bloated, crazy thing. Heaven's Gate is like a really famous one that like almost destroyed Hollywood or whatever, but like Richard Kelly's Southland Tales is a movie like that I fucking adore. Even Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia, I think, is a movie like that. That's just this maximalist, huge, crazy beast that can't be wrought back down to the earth. And Beau's Afraid is a movie that lives in that sort of world, and I just admire movies like that so much. I did it. I'm losing my voice. It's 4:15 in the morning. I need to go to bed. I didn't think I was going to talk for this long.